Your throat is dry. Your lips are cracking. There is no river in sight. No cloud in the sky. No tap to turn. You are standing in the middle of a desert. And the nearest water might be 100 miles away. What do you do? For tens of thousands of years. This wasn't a thought experiment. This was Tuesday. Long before wells. Long before maps. Long before anyone had ever seen a plastic bottle. Ancient humans were surviving in some of the driest, most punishing landscapes on Earth. Not by luck. Not by accident. By a set of skills so precise. So quietly brilliant, that modern survival experts still study them today. So how did they actually do it? How did people live for generations in places where a single day without water can kill you? Let's start with the obvious problem. A human body loses water constantly. Through breath, through sweat, through simply existing under a merciless sun. Lose enough of it, and your blood thickens, your organs strain, your mind starts to blur. In extreme desert heat, dehydration can turn fatal in under a day. And yet entire cultures didn't just survive in deserts. They thrived there, for thousands of years, without a single well dug by machine. The first trick wasn't finding water. It was storing it. In the Kalahari Desert of southern Africa, anthropologist Richard Lee spent years in the 1960s living alongside the Honski Sand people. One of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth. What he documented reshaped how scientists understood hunter-gatherer life. The sand didn't wander the desert hoping to stumble onto water. They planned for its absence. Months before the dry season hit, they would bury ostrich eggshells in the sand near known water sources. Empty shells, filled to the top, sealed, and hidden at specific, memorized locations across their territory. A kind of underground water map, carried entirely in memory. When the rains disappeared and the land turned to dust, they didn't panic. They walked straight to a shell buried months earlier, exactly where they'd left it. Think about that for a second. No signs, no landmarks most outsiders would notice. Just a mental map so detailed it could locate a single buried object in an ocean of sand. Months later, without fail. But eggshells could only hold so much. The real survival secret was underground. And it wasn't water at all. It was food shaped like water. The Kalahari is home to plants like the Sama melon and the Gemsbok cucumber. Tough, bitter, unglamorous-looking things that grow just beneath the surface. But crack one open, and you find something extraordinary. Flesh that is up to 90% water. For the San, these plants weren't a backup plan. They were a primary water source. Eaten daily, sometimes dozens in a single week. Researchers studying sand diets found that during the driest months, some communities went weeks relying almost entirely on these underground reservoirs instead of open water at all. Here's the part that should stop you. They weren't just eating plants. They were reading an entire ecosystem like a survival manual. Anthropologist Louis Liebenberg, who spent decades documenting sand tracking abilities, described something remarkable. Sand trackers didn't just follow animal footprints to find prey. They followed them to find water. A herd of antelope moving with purpose in the early morning, cutting a straight line across open ground, wasn't random. It meant water nearby. Bird flight patterns at dusk. Certain species always circling back toward a hidden source. Told the same story. Even insect behavior mattered. Bees, it turns out, rarely nest more than a few miles from a reliable water source. Find a hive, and you've likely found water too. This wasn't folklore. It was applied ecology, passed down for generations, refined by trial and consequence. Because getting it wrong meant death. Now picture the scene. Dawn breaks over a dry, orange-tinted landscape. A tracker crouches low, studying pressed sand and bent grass. Reading a story written by animals hours before. No compass, no GPS. Just decades of accumulated knowledge encoded into a single glance at the ground. They stand, adjust direction slightly, and walk with total confidence toward a source no outsider could ever have found. This same ingenuity shows up on the other side of the planet. In the deserts of Australia, Aboriginal communities relied on something called a soak, A shallow depression dug into a dry riverbed where groundwater collects just beneath the surface. Certain trees, like the mulga, were used as living indicators. Their roots reached deep, and where they grew thick and healthy in barren country, water usually sat not far below. Some communities also tapped specific tree roots directly, extracting drinkable moisture stored inside the plant itself. Anthropologists studying these desert cultures, including researchers like Norman Tyndale, documented how this knowledge was passed down as sacred information, tied directly to survival and to story, because losing that knowledge meant losing lives. And it wasn't only about finding water in the present. Ancient humans also left behind proof of a very different past. Deep in the Sahara, in a remote valley called Wadi Sura in Egypt, archaeologists discovered rock paintings now known as the Cave of Swimmers. Human figures, painted in motion, arms outstretched, appearing to swim, in the middle of what is now one of the driest places on Earth. The paintings are thousands of years old, and they tell us something almost hard to believe. This desert wasn't always a desert. Ancient humans living there had adapted, generation after generation, to a landscape that was slowly, silently drying out beneath their feet. And they left a message about it, painted onto stone, long before anyone had a word for climate change. So here's the twist. We tend to imagine ancient desert survival as a desperate, lucky scramble, a person stumbling onto an oasis by chance. But that's almost never what it was. It was systems, memory, ecology, passed down knowledge tested against real consequences for thousands of years. The people who survived deserts weren't the luckiest. They were the ones who paid the closest attention. And that's the part that should make you pause. Because right now, you can turn a handle and clean water appears. You never have to read a bird's flight path or memorize the location of a buried shell to survive tomorrow. That convenience is new, astonishingly, historically new, for most of human existence. Survival meant noticing everything, the direction a herd moved, the health of a distant tree, the sound of insects at dusk, because missing one detail could cost your life. We've traded that hyper-awareness for convenience, which is, in almost every practical way, a good trade, but it's worth remembering what it replaced. A kind of attention to the world so sharp, so relentless, that it kept entire cultures alive in landscapes that seem, to us, almost impossible to survive in at all. Your throat is dry, your lips are cracking, and somewhere, thousands of years ago, someone just like you looked at the same empty horizon, and knew exactly where to go.